Good evening, everyone. Almost everyone in Neenah knows my name, or at least recognizes it. I am Theda Clark. Yes, that Theda Clark. Actually, it is Theda Clark Peters. Many of you may know a bit about me, but tonight I would like to share with you my whole story. I was born here in Neenah on February 13th, 1871, to Charles and Caroline Clark. I was named after my grandmother, Theda Tamblin Clark. My father had always admired his mother and her strength, and I think that's why I was named in her honor. I wish I would have had a chance to know her, but sadly, she passed away just a week after I was born. When I was born, Papa was working in a hardware store, and by the time I was 1, he and 3 other local businessmen started a company called Kimberly and Clark. Is it still around? Does anyone have heard of it? I'm glad to hear that. Okay. Papa was a very hardworking man, and he wanted to make sure that the company did well, so he spent a lot of time at the office. He had invested all of his savings, including what he had earned being a soldier in the Civil War, that my grandmother had helped him save. In the beginning, we didn't have a lot of extra money, but we worked hard and saved what we could. I was lucky enough to go to the Neenah Public Schools, and the first I attended was the Point School. It was a one-room school not far from home. As Papa's business became more successful, we moved to a larger home on Wisconsin Avenue. Is that still around? Yes. Good, okay. Then I was able to go to school at what was later known as the Washington School. It was so fun to be just like the other children. After moving to Wisconsin Avenue, Papa became the mayor of Neenah, and my life would never be the same. My younger sister was born in 1879 and younger brother in 1883. Papa wanted me to be an example for them, so his expectations of me increased. He wanted his children to be proper ladies and gentlemen. Our education now included refinement lessons, and for me, that included piano and voice lessons. We also started to travel, mostly to visit friends and family around the country. Papa's political ambitions grew as he was elected to the Wisconsin State Legislature and eventually to Congress. That meant more traveling for the whole family.
His voice really does carry.
In the fall of 1887, I enrolled in Wells College in Aurora, New York, which at the time was a private women's college. We studied language, music, history, math, and science in a place that felt like home. The goal of college went beyond our personal education, as we hoped to be able to help our future husband, educate our children, and those in the community as well. We were taught manners, how to be courteous and considerate of the feelings and wishes of others. In short, we learned to be ladies. Papa supported me so I could continue my piano and voice lessons. I was busy, but I truly enjoyed going to school. Papa and I wrote many letters to each other over the years, and when I was in school, he would often say how very proud of me he was and encourage me to work hard. Often, he would tell me about his work and how he hoped it would protect me and the chicks, which is what he called my brother and sister. He would remind me to watch over my siblings whenever I was home. My favorite part of the letters were when he called me his best big girl. It made me feel so grown up and happy. A letter from 1890 really resonated with me. I had written to him and told him that his letters really helped me as I continued to better myself. His reply stated that I had a grand great-grandmother and one of the best mothers ever, and I should use them as an example. But then he cautioned me that it wasn't as good enough to be just as they were. Papa said that women of my time had to be more than what their mothers were. He told me that some women use their education as adornment, but others use their education with their high moral spirit to propel them to something greater, and that is what I should do. He also encouraged me to do my best to make someone else happy. I had my work cut out for me. Papa finished up his term in Congress and was happy to return to Neenah and his business. We didn't know it at the time, but his health had taken a turn. He and Mama decided to make a trip back to Teresa, New York, his hometown. They left me and Neenah to care for my siblings before my senior year at Wells. Unfortunately, Papa got even sicker in New York. Mama sent telegrams to Neenah, and we were soon on the train to see him. By the time we got there, Papa was mostly gone. He died on September 10th, 1891, and it was a very sad day for all of us. His funeral was a few weeks later here in Neenah. A whole city came to pay their respects. Thousands of people came to either the house or here at Oak Hill Cemetery. They were Papa's friends and co-workers, congressmen, people of the city, including those that worked in the mills. He had always made it a point to help out those in the city who were less fortunate like he was when he first came to town. He wanted to make the experience better for those who came after him. Losing Papa was so hard on our family. He was my support and my best teacher, urging me to become a better and more noble person. But now he was gone. I wasn't sure what to do or where to go from here. I remember standing beside his grave after it was filled in, and I had a basket of flowers. I put the flowers one by one around his grave, remembering all of the wonderful things we had written to each other. I always had a hard time believing he was really gone. But the world doesn't stop for grief, and I had to move forward. So I went back to Wells College to finish up my senior year, and I graduated in the spring of 1892 and spent much of the summer traveling around with my friends. In the fall, family decided that we wanted to build the dream house that Papa had planned. We continued to own part of the investment in the company, so money wasn't an issue. I took charge of overseeing the construction, which was not a typical thing for a woman to do at the time, but I did it anyway. Once the house project was finished, I did a lot of traveling, visiting friends from college, and I met a lot of interesting people, including a Will Peters from Goshen, Indiana. He was a nice fellow, but after Papa's death, I wasn't exactly sure if, how, or when I would be looking to find a husband. Will and I wrote many letters to each other, especially as we traveled. We didn't really fit into each other's hometown, but he was interesting enough to stay friends with.
Hopefully you've heard of it before.
Simply traveling and visiting with my friends just wasn't enough for me. I kept hearing Papa's voice telling me that I should try to help others. I decided I needed to become more involved here in Neenah. I loved being around the children of my friends and decided that maybe something with children could be fun. I had been involved in hosting dance classes, and in 1895 I was named the assistant superintendent of the Sunday school program at the Universalist Church in Neenah. I was also asked to sing or play piano at several clubs here. As I grew more confident, I joined a few women's clubs. I also started donating to the causes in the city that I believed in, such as the Presbyterian Church, the Opera House, and the library. During my travels, I often ended up in Chicago, and while visiting and reading newspapers, I heard about Jane Addams and the Hull House. The Hull House was a community of university women who were providing social and educational opportunities for all people in their neighborhood. Everyone was treated with respect. Cultural activities were planned where all people could attend. There also were advocates for addressing legislative reform such as child labor laws, women's suffrage, health care reform, and immigration. Kind of like now. I didn't think Neenah, with its small population compared to Chicago, needed a settlement like Hull House, but I wondered if pieces of it could work here. Miss Addams' idea seemed like something worth trying. In 1899, I asked her if she would be willing to come to Neenah to speak. She said yes, and came on January 13th, 1900, and spoke at the Menasha Library. I had set up a lunch with Miss Addams, 5 other ladies, and myself. We got to meet her and talk about her travels, her work, and the settlement ideas in general. I even had to introduce her to the audience for the speech. She was a wonderful speaker, and I listened intently to every word she said. I was so proud that she took the time to come and speak to us and was hopeful that the ladies and gentlemen in the audience would be interested in doing something similar for Neenah. 1900 turned out to be a very busy year for me. Remember my friend from Indiana, Will Peters? Well, we had been seeing each other for a while now and writing all those letters. I finally decided to give love a chance. Billy, as I came to call him, asked me to marry him. Sweet. I said yes, and got Mama's approval as well. There were some people in Neenah who would have preferred that I marry a local boy, but it just wasn't meant to be. Billy did a lot of traveling, being a wallpaper salesman, but that was okay. Our engagement was announced in the Neenah newspapers around Christmas time in 1900. We married on May 14th, 1901 at Mama's house in Neenah. Reverend Chapin married us in front of 75 guests. The house was simply decorated with flowers, and we had such beautiful music. It was one of the happiest days of my life. At first, I tried living with Billy down in Goshen. We had a small apartment, and I tried being a homemaker. I'll admit, I wasn't good at it. I never felt at home there like I did in Neenah. Billy did so much traveling for work that I made a lot of trips home. There was so much more to do here. I enjoyed being able to go to women's clubs, and I loved arranging parties. My favorites were the parties for the children in Neenah. I was able to invite some of them along with their parents who were working at our factories. I knew some of the parents couldn't afford many Christmas gifts, but I could. I loved shopping for the families and decorating Mama's house for the party. It really made the holiday for the children special and made me feel so good about helping out. One year, I invited a newspaper reporter to come, and I was so embarrassed by the write-up in the newspaper. I specifically asked them not to say that the children were poor, but of course, as a newspaper reporter, they did exactly the opposite. From then on, I had parties, but did not invite any newspapers. Again, I oversaw work on Mama's house as it needed remodeling. Neenah was also looking to build a library and an opera house. I felt that we really needed to do both projects. While it was true that Mrs. Kimberly had just spent money on remodeling the library we had, I felt that she didn't see the big picture. We needed something bigger, something space to grow. So I purchased the land for the building right along the river and donated it to the city. I donated additional money to the library project and worked to fundraise.
Now, Wells House may sound familiar to a lot of you because
I also worked on the Opera House project. With seeing so many shows during my travels, I thought the Neenah community could really benefit from more culture. It was a lot to ask for both projects, but I felt that if we had both, we would have more opportunities for young people to be engaged. I supported the Opera House as well. I had a great vision for additional rest spaces for farmers when they came to town, but that would have to wait until later. While working on all of these projects, something special happened. Billy and I found out that we were expecting a baby. It was a very exciting time, and I truly love children and couldn't wait to have my own. Childbirth at the time could be difficult. I knew a few girls who didn't survive or their babies didn't survive, and Neenah didn't have a hospital, and sometimes a simple medical procedure could go wrong or something would happen and there wouldn't be enough time to get to a hospital. Because I had seen so many tragedies, I was worried. I had a will written, and just in case, I set aside some funds for a community purpose. I didn't put it in writing, but I spoke to my brother about what I was thinking. I told him to consider building a hospital with the money, as it was something we desperately needed here in Neenah. On October 18th, 1903, after a long labor, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Billy was traveling again, but I was home with Mama. We sent him a telegram, and he was on his way. At first, the doctor said the baby and I were doing well, but it didn't last. I started bleeding, and it wouldn't stop. Billy made it home just in time. He was holding me in his arms as I died. I could hear our baby crying, and I wanted to do so much more with my life. I remember thinking it just wasn't fair. My life shouldn't end this way right after I'd had the child I so longed for. But sometimes life doesn't go the way we planned. My daughter lived a full and happy life, but she did it without me. I died on October 21st, 1903. I was touched when the city of Neenah came out for my funeral a few days later. Reverend Chapin said a prayer at the house, and the funeral hearse with 4 gray horses took my body here to Oak Hill. I was buried next to Papa. He's still very loud even now. My brother carried out my request, and a hospital was built in Neenah shortly after my death. I'm thankful he was able to give the community one last gift for me. Throughout my life, I held on to a piece of advice Papa gave to me on my 16th birthday. He said, "Theda, the best happiness we get in this world is in making someone other than ourselves most happy." I took that advice to heart for all of my life, and I hope that you will apply it to yours as well. Thank you.
There we go. Okay. Well, good evening. As I said, my name is Charles Benjamin Clark. My friends call me Charlie. The newspapers call me CB. Maybe you've heard about me before. I was born and raised, actually I was born in Teresa, New York in 1842. Unfortunately, my father passed away when I was very, very young. And that just left my mother and I living in this Teresa, New York. Now in the 1840s, a widow with a small child didn't have much of a chance. Women didn't necessarily work out of the home. If they could find jobs, they weren't paid very well. So my brother was working here in Neenah. So we decided that in order to survive, we're going to stick together as a family and we're going to move to Neenah. So we moved to Neenah, and when we got here to Neenah, shortly thereafter, my brother passed away. So tragedy struck us twice. I, being 8, 9 years old at the time, I knew I had to find a way to make some income for the family. So I pestered the furniture factory man, a man by the name of Robert Cole. And I kept pestering him for a job, and eventually he gave in and he gave me a job at the factory, at the furniture factory. Well, it's a very dangerous job working at the furniture factory, and the job that I was assigned to do was to bend the wood for the backs of the chairs. I'm talking about backs of chairs, curves there. So I had to bend the wood for that. And like most people working in the factory, I lost a few digits in the process here. But I did have a job, and it paid $7 a month. I was pretty excited about that. So I was doing that for a considerable amount of time throughout the 1850s. And then the 1860s came. And in the 1860s, there was this dispute that took place in the nation. We called it the Civil War was happening. If you're from the South, they have a different name for it. The War of Northern Aggression, they like to call it. But the Union was feuding, and I knew that I could join the Union Army. So I volunteered and joined the Union Army, the 21st Wisconsin Regiment. I joined, and I was a private as a wagoneer was the job that I had. Now, with any kind of war, you see death and tragedy, and I was accustomed, and I saw those things as I was traveling this beautiful country of ours. But the good thing is I was making $14 a month. That was the pay for the average soldier during the Civil War. Now, unfortunately, I had to buy my own uniforms as a private, and I had to find my own food, pay for my own food. But any money I had left over, I sent back home to my mother. My mother, her name, by the way, was Theda Clark was her name, and she would collect the money until the war was over with. Now, I served in the war until June of 1865, and I came back to Neenah as a lieutenant. So I went from a private all the way up through to a lieutenant. So when I got back to Neenah, I was very surprised that my mother had saved tremendous amounts of the money that I sent home to her. She saved so much of it that I could invest it into a hardware store. So I invested into a dry goods or a hardware store back in the day, and it was very profitable. And this business suited me a lot better than a factory worker. I didn't really enjoy the factory work at all. My thumb was getting sore. I got to hold the button. Not used to this newfangled technology. In any case, I came back and I was working in this hardware store, and I found the love of my life. Carrie Hubbard is her name. And her parents grew up here in Neenah. You can visit her. She's around the corner here. Gravestone next to mine. And we married at the right age of 25. I was 25 and I married Carrie. Carrie and I were a match made in heaven. We had similar values. She was a very strong woman like my mother. So we tied together very well. And we had 3 children in the process. Our oldest, which is Theda, which you will see over here. And then our middle child is Caroline, and the youngest was Charles Jr. Now, right after Theda was born, got this crazy notion that I wanted to make a change in Neenah. So I did. I met up with an old war friend of mine, Colonel Myron Hayes was the guy's name, and he worked at a paper mill here in town. The paper mill was the Smith and Van Oosting paper mill, and he worked there. And I talked to him about maybe Neenah is big enough to have 2 paper mills in town. There's plenty of water power along the river. So I talked to him about it, and he thought, yeah, maybe we could do that. Well, as a single businessman, there was no way I could do it on my own. There's no way I could build the factory, run it all on my own, and I didn't have all the capital that I needed. So I found 3 other businessmen to help me out. A man by the name of Kimberly, another man by the name of Babcock, and the third gentleman was, Shattuck. Shattuck was the third guy. And the 4 of us got together and we made this company called Kimberly and Clark Company. I don't know if you heard it or not. We hope it was very successful out there and kind of put Neenah on the map. So we invested in this company, but
Peters? Well,
and it took off and it was doing very well. Even though I was working with this company and spending quite a bit of time with it, I felt the need to give back to the community. And I often would work at and volunteer for things. I was a volunteer firefighter here in Neenah. And I thought it was very important to kind of work at giving back to the community. I also I learned growing up and working at the furniture factory and going off to war and at the hardware store that you need to save money for a rainy day. So hard work was a major value that I held, and saving for a rainy day was kind of another major value that I held on to. I felt that I could give my service to the city as a mayor. So I ran for mayor in the 1890s. In the 1880s, and I won 3 years in a row. I was mayor, and I hope that I instilled some of those values into the city, where we wanted to meet our budget. We wanted to pay off debts. We didn't want to go deeper into debt. And in fact, in one of my campaign speeches, I quote here, say, "Everything that makes life great here in Neenah. We have a good society, happy homes, good churches of many denominations, and the best of schools." And I hope we still feel that way here in our community. That we established these things way back in the 1880s, and even today, hopefully we still have those things.
True that this is Kimberly.
Well, my family was part of this universal parish, and in this parish, we would have women reverends that would come in and give speeches, several speeches in there, and talk about women's rights and suffrage movement, and also temperance was a big thing that was proclaimed here. And my wife was very active in the church. She was part of the ladies' union in there. She made sure that there was books for the Sunday school children, made sure the bills were paid, and again, as I said earlier, a very strong woman here in the church. I found an opportunity in 1885 that I ran for the Wisconsin State Legislature. So I became a representative for our district in Madison. And while I was there, some of the main issues that I was focused on was temperance and on women's suffrage. And I proposed several bills that that got a lot of support, but actually never really passed here in the 1880s. Until 1886. And in 1886, we eventually got a bill passed where women could vote on school-related issues. So the American Society believed that this was one thing that women had a lot of interest in and that they could vote for. So in 1886 was the first time women could vote for the Neenah superintendent, and 51 women came out and voted for our superintendent. This was kind of commonplace throughout the country that women, when they were getting the rights to vote, certain states would give them. School was probably the most popular right to vote for school issues. But as time went on, other city, local primary elections and state elections, and eventually some states would even allow women to vote in the federal election. Well, I served 2 terms there as a state legislature, and then I ran for representative on the state level in Washington, D.C. And I was part of the 50th and 51st Congress in Washington, D.C. in the 1887 to 89, and then again in 89 to 91. My daughter, as I mentioned before here, I knew that she needed to become a strong person, so I sent her to Wells College in New York. It's an all-women's college out there. You may remember it because Grover Cleveland's wife also went to school there and graduated. She was the first bride, actually, ever married in the White House, which I'm sure you all remember. Grover Cleveland's wife, she was 21 years old when she married Grover Cleveland, but she was also an alumnus of this Wells School. So a very good school for women. Well, at the end of the Congress, a lot of the gentlemen there in Congress, we didn't see eye to eye about women's suffrage. So after my term in 91, I became ill. And I wanted to go see my old birthplace. So I went back to New York, and there I got actually sicker. And I was so sick that they sent a telegram back here to Neenah that several people came out to see me. My family came back out to New York along with some other people, and I passed away in September of 91 there in New York. And they brought me back here to Neenah, and when they brought me back here to Neenah, people of all walks of life came to the funeral. In fact, the pallbearers at my funeral were the foremen in my factory. They wanted to be the pallbearers. So I guess the gist of the story here is that as I was mayor, as I was state representative, and as I moved on to Madison, I really tried to encourage this women's suffrage and temperance movement. And I hope I made Neenah a better place to be. And it doesn't matter where you start out in life, you can always make a difference. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. Oh my, Helen, look at all these people here who came to listen to our story tonight.
Isn't it wonderful, Jess? Just like the good old days when you and I were working for the women's suffrage. We had such an amazing time reaching out to the young women across the country and right here in Neenah. But before we get into all that, we should probably introduce ourselves. I am Helen Kimberly Stuart, born here in Neenah, December 3rd, 1868.
And my name is Jessie Jack Hooker. I was born in Iowa on a farm on November 9th, 1865. So you're probably wondering how a girl from Iowa ended up in these parts. Well, my sister Florence married a man from Oshkosh in 1883. And when I came to visit them, I met a wonderful young man named Ben Hooper. In fact, Ben was born here in Neenah, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. And here's the first of our several connections between us. Ben's father, Moses Hooper, was the attorney for my father's business, Kimberly Clark Corporation.
My Ben was such a wonderful man. We married in Iowa in 1888, and then we settled in Oshkosh. Ben followed in his father's footsteps and became an attorney. We had a beautiful daughter, and I was a lucky woman in so many ways. You see, at that time, women were often discouraged from taking interest in politics. But Ben encouraged me to participate in civic affairs, and he was in favor of women's suffrage from very early on. He was so much in favor of women's suffrage that every other time he went to the polls, he would vote for the candidate of my choice or the position that I chose. Or so he told me. Even though I couldn't legally vote, he ensured that I had a voice. And in fact, people would often ask him if it was his turn to vote or my turn to vote.
It makes me sad to say it, but you were much luckier than I. I married Herbert William Zachary Stuart in 1889, but our firstborn daughter died at birth. Her stone is right behind you there. We later had a son whom I adored. My husband and I raised our little family here in Neenah, but I'll admit it wasn't the happiest of marriages. Luckily, my parents instilled in me strong values and encouraged me to think of others more than of myself. So I focused on the good that I could do instead of the disappointments that I saw in my home life. My mother was a great example of a strong woman. She was a community leader in her own right, and I wanted to live up to her legacy. I was able to find my voice and use it.
And we are so thankful that you did, Helen. I remember when we were both members of the Daughters of the American Revolution, the local chapter, just after the turn of the century. It was such an extraordinary organization that helped to promote strong women. And then as World War I came upon us, we also made sure to do our part by joining the Red Cross and helping soldiers.
In fact, the Great War was a turning point for many women. When the battles ended, many of the women leading our local and state organizations became increasingly frustrated, both by society and our role in it, or lack thereof. We wanted to strengthen our communities by improving health care. We needed more hospitals and more clinics. Some of the men in leadership positions didn't agree that this was a priority. And because women were not allowed to vote, there wasn't much we could do to change their minds. That's how so many of us became interested in the women's suffrage movement.
That is so true, Helen. After just a couple of meetings at the League of Women Voters, I was convinced that securing the vote for women was the best way to help our community and our country. We weren't going to get anywhere until we had a voice and we could participate in government.
Congress passed the 19th Amendment on June 4th, 1919, and sent it to the states to be ratified. I'm proud to say that Wisconsin was the first state to approve it on June 10th, 1919. But that was not the end of our fight. At the time, we needed 36 states to approve it before it could be sent to the Constitution.
I was honored to be a part of the group that toured some Western states to help convince their legislatures to ratify the amendment. I was working with the National American Women's Suffrage Association at the time, and I did a lot of speaking tours. In Iowa, I made history by being the first woman to do a speech on the street. Oh, how I loved that work, Helen. From 1919 to 1920, I spoke in Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, and Utah. That was quite a trip. Far from Iowa. Don't you like to think that our efforts made a big difference, Helen?
Absolutely.
Tennessee was the last state to be that we needed for ratification. And finally, the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was adopted on August 18th, 1920, which meant that women could finally vote for the president in that fall's election.
Even after the amendment passed, there were plenty of dedicated women who knew their work was just beginning. Carrie Chapman Catt from the National American Women's Suffrage Association decided to form a new group. In February of 1920, the League of Women Voters was started. Their initial goal was to help 20 million women actually go to the polls and vote. The group was nonpartisan and encouraged women to actively participate in government. It also worked to keep women informed of the issues of the day.
The best part of the League of Women Voters was that it could be localized. The national group did good work, but each state could have its own league, and even each congressional district could be represented. I had the great honor of being chosen as the first president of the Wisconsin League of Women Voters in February of 1920. At our first meeting in Milwaukee, we decided on two goals. We wanted to educate women about the voting process, and we called that citizenship education, which means something different now. And we wanted to get 10,000 women from Wisconsin signed up to be members of our organization.
I remember that meeting. We talked about what women could do to help the country and the public. We knew we needed to be educated and focus on the issues before we went to the polls. We were also able to set up a citizenship school in Milwaukee fairly quickly to help further educate women. We established a list of topics we wanted to address. We wanted better conditions for women and children, including higher standards of home, state, and national life. We also wanted better public health and education. And we wanted to establish independent citizenship for married women.
I spoke at the Women's Christian Temperance Union Convention in 1920, and I must say that the Neenah chapter did things the right way. I was proud to be from this area. They had a demonstration of how to cast a ballot and how to use the ballot, how to mark it, which wasn't clear. Those ballots in those days were very different from ballots nowadays. At the close of the convention, I told the ladies in the audience of this important opportunity to help the nation. I also reminded them that it was their duty to be informed and independent voters. By independent, I meant don't vote the way your husband says to vote necessarily, unless you agree with him.
Then came November 2nd, 1920, the big day. We were finally able to cast our ballots. It turned out to be a very busy weekend for me because my son got married the day before. But I was ready on Election Day, and so were the ladies of Neenah. We helped the Republicans add to their majority sweep.
Although November 2nd was a big day, those of us at the Wisconsin League of Women Voters knew that it wasn't the end. We held our first convention in February 1921 and went right back to work. I was once again elected president of the State League. As a group, our goals were far-reaching. We wanted to continue increasing our membership while improving people's day-to-day lives. To start, we wanted to help establish industry standards for wages, child labor hours. Remember, children started work at a very young age and worked long hours. And how long the working day should last for everyone. We also wanted to create formal standards for kindergarten classes and teacher salaries. We continued our work improving social hygiene standards in public health, and we hope to urge communities to consider adding women to the police force in larger cities. Can you imagine? In 1922, women working on the police force in Milwaukee? On a personal level, I also started focusing on world peace. After hearing and reading about the horrors of World War I, including your son's stories, I really believed that disarmament was necessary to prevent future atrocities.
I remember your speeches, Jess, on world peace because it was something I wanted as well. My son was a soldier during World War I. Thankfully, he returned safely, but that wasn't true for many other families. No one should have to go through that kind of pain. Your speeches on world peace got the attention of those in state politics too, right?
Yes, they did. So much so that I was asked to be the Democratic nominee for the United States Senate from Wisconsin. I was running against incumbent Bob La Follette Sr., and so I knew it would be an uphill battle from the start, and not just because I was a woman. In 1922, Wisconsin was a very Republican state, and I knew I didn't have much of a chance. However, running for office was good practice for the things I learned through the League of Women Voters. I always made sure that I understood the issues before I opened my mouth, unlike many of the men. I'll be honest and say sometimes my opinion didn't follow the party line because I wanted to make sure I stayed true to my beliefs. My goal was to be honest and straightforward, and I was just that. I knew women around the state were watching me, and I hoped my campaign would inspire other women to run for office in the future.
Your decision to get involved in politics also had a huge impact on my life. I remember you saying that you didn't want to jeopardize the effectiveness of the League of Women Voters, so you resigned as president. At a special meeting a week after you officially accepted your state candidate nomination, I was appointed the new president of the League. It was such an honor and privilege to follow in your footsteps.
Helen, I knew the organization was in good hands with your leadership. You worked so hard to encourage women to vote. But don't be shy. Tell these people about your own adventures in politics.
Yes, I did. I was elected alderman in Neenah in 1930. I was the first female alderman in the city, and I even served on the planning commission. In my time at the League, we focused on local issues as a way to impact society. I'm happy to say that I helped clean up our city by establishing a city-wide garbage collection. I also helped change how the school board was chosen. It used to be that the city leaders appointed people to the board, but we made it so that residents would vote for the school board. Then I got really ambitious and decided to run for mayor in 1932. Turned out Neenah wasn't quite ready for that. But it was an amazing experience, and it taught me a lot.
Well, Helen, when you were helping shape Neenah's future, I was able to concentrate on my message about world peace. I attended the World Disarmament Conference in Geneva, Switzerland in 1932. And you remember right around 1932, a man named Adolf Hitler was gearing up. And so, bravo for the Swiss that they called this conference. It was wonderful to hear so many people speak about the possibility of peace. In Geneva, I was even given the opportunity to speak on the radio about disarmament, as well as deliver 750,000 signatures from American citizens who were similarly concerned about disarmament.
As a woman. Yes, as a woman. I remember you coming to the Women's Club Federation meeting shortly after that. I was the general chairman at the meeting, and you gave a speech about your Geneva conference.
I never got tired of talking about world peace. Just look at me. Still talking about it now, 84 years after my death. It truly is an important cause, and I wanted nothing more but to continue to work toward world peace. Unfortunately, my health just didn't cooperate. In 1934, I was diagnosed with cancer, and I died on May 7th, 1935.
That was such a sad day. I always appreciated your dedication to women's causes, and you were such an inspiration. I continued to work for Neenah, serving on the school board and the library board. I ended up getting divorced, which at that time was not very common. But regardless of what was happening at home, I stayed focused on helping others. I worked hard to preserve Lakeshore Drive and donated the land for Kimberly Point Park. The city wanted to take over the land and make it private property, and I just couldn't see that. That area was so important to my youth and all my friends. And so that is why today we have Kimberly Point, the park, and the Kimberly Lighthouse. Through it all, I was never afraid to speak my mind, which probably means I stepped on some toes and made some people angry, but I believed I had the citizens' best interest at heart. My time here came to an end on May 12th, 1956. It has been delightful reminiscing with you today, Jess. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure, Helen. And we both hope that you enjoyed hearing our stories. If there's one thing we both want to encourage you to do, it is to make your voice count. Get out and vote. And don't forget to register first.
Well, given that the mosquitoes are eating us up now, we hit that little witching hour, didn't we? Well, I know many of you have heard all the other three, and this is your final stop before the sun goes down. I am Ida Krueger Barnett, and my place of resting is right beside the orange flag, and right beside my husband. I know that many of you don't know my story, but you do know Krueger and Barnett. And I wonder how many of you have been to the Krueger hardware store. Many of you. Well, that was started by my father, William Krueger, in the 1800s. And the Barnett drugstore was started by my husband, Morris Krueger. And it was on the corner of Wisconsin Avenue and Commercial Street. Now imagine that corner, and imagine how many changes have taken place there. Even in the last 50 years since my passing, which was actually 60 years ago. Imagine that. Imagine that. This city has changed so much. Well, I spent my entire life in the Neenah area. I was born to William and Anna Krueger and the youngest of 5 children. I was born in the town of Clayton. Originally, my family focused on the farm, but we soon moved to the city. It was here that I attended the local school system. I was a very proud graduate of the class of 1882. Imagine that. There were 4 of us. 4 of us. That's all that graduated that year. Our school was a wonderful new building called Washington School. Perhaps some of you are familiar with it. Originally, it was a beautiful, beautiful building with wonderful oak furnishings inside. In fact, the woman under this dress actually attended that school before it was torn down. Perhaps you would know that. Soon after graduation, but not before I attended the University of Wisconsin in Madison, I met a fine young man named Morris Barnett. He came to Neenah in 1880 to become a pharmacist. We were married in Neenah on November 3rd, 1887, in my parents' home on Franklin Avenue. It was a beautiful ceremony with Reverend Chapin and Reverend Mary DeLong officiating. My favorite gift was a set of books from my husband's uncle. We absolutely loved reading, and he knew it, and he shared some of his precious possessions with us. I have always loved reading, and Morris and I made a pact to read to one another throughout our married life, and we attempted to do so every day of our lives. Books were a very important part of the Barnett drugstore too. In fact, we were the first establishment in Neenah to sell hard-covered books. Imagine that. On Sundays, when we were reading our newspapers, which we did faithfully, we would read the New York Times bestseller list. So we would know what Americans were reading in the Times. What interested them? What were they excited about? Well, we took some risks and ordered books for our store. One very large risk that we took when we ordered 25 copies of one book really had me trembling. Can you guess what the book was? It was Gone with the Wind. And we ordered 25 copies. They sold out in a day. Imagine. One day. Of course, we had to place another order, but that story always tickles me. Morris and I were blessed with 4 wonderful children: Margaret, Ida, Laura, and Morris Jr. The kids kept me very busy, but we still had time to read together and to read our newspapers and to follow the happenings in the women's suffrage movement. Women were seeking the chance to vote alongside men, and I really wanted a chance to do that. As my children grew, they also attended the Neenah High School and all graduated, and I wanted to be involved in their education, so I was instrumental in starting the first Parent-Teacher Association in Neenah School District, the PTA. Imagine that. They each finished their education and went on to school. My youngest, shortly after he graduated, the Great War broke out in Europe. I'm sure you know that I'm referring to World War I, and it was a turning point in my life. 2 of my relatives were greatly impacted by the war: my son Morris and my cousin Matilda. We called her Tilly, or Cousin Tilly, and she had a remarkable story. She was also a Neenah High School graduate, and she decided she wanted to be a nurse. She went on to Chicago to study and worked under a very famous surgeon named Dr. Nicholas Senn, S-E-N-N. I encourage you to read more about him. His story is fascinating. He was one of the first to actually perform cancer treatment and was a remarkable surgeon in the 1800s. My dear Tilly loved to learn, and she was a remarkable nurse. When the World War I broke out, she was in the first set of nurses that went to Serbia in 1914. Queen Sophia of Greece gave her an award for meritorious service after the war. Later in life, she also received an award from Eleanor Roosevelt that was given to her at the Chicago World's Fair. Her nursing accomplishments were paramount, and we are so proud of our dear cousin Tilly and the path that she laid for women. Her story gives me great joy, but my dear son's story was one of sadness and frustration. My dear boy, loved by all in Neenah, went on to the University of Wisconsin in Madison. But when the war broke out, he joined the Marines and was sent to Europe. The communication was sporadic, but we were thrilled when we received any letter at all. We received letters right up until the Argonne Offensive, at the end of the war. But then the letters stopped. No communication at all for 6 months, just silence. We had hoped that perhaps he was injured and recuperating somewhere, but we didn't know. My dear daughter Ida went to Washington to visit the Red Cross establishment and ask about him, but they had nothing. I finally went to a Chicago Tribune reporter who had covered the war. After several weeks, we got the news. He had found Maurice's grave. He had died in France and was buried there. It was a horrible day to learn that truth. I knew I had to do something to honor my son and all the boys who didn't make it home. I couldn't let them be forgotten. I helped to organize the Holly Dekoff American Legion Auxiliary. I was their first president and served as a treasurer for many years. It was the least I could do in memory of my boy. As our family was growing up, we read a lot about women's suffrage, and I knew what I believed and why. After many years of fighting, women's suffrage finally passed in 1919, 100 years ago. It was ratified by the states in 1920, becoming the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. That meant I could vote. I could honor Maurice by making my voice heard. Let me tell you about the first time I voted. It was in the 1920 presidential election. Do any of you recall it? No, I guess not. Oh, you youngsters. Well, 4 days before the election, unfortunately, I was taken to the hospital and had emergency surgery. As I lay in my hospital bed recuperating, my husband came in and said, "I've just voted." And I said, "I want to vote. I desperately wanted to vote." I don't know how he did it. But dear Maurice got an absentee ballot, and I voted right there from my hospital bed in Theda Clark Hospital. My very first opportunity to vote, and I never missed a chance after that. I also joined a fantastic group of ladies, the League of Women Voters, and I must tell you about a wonderful time when I had a very important visitor. Mr. Walter Kohler, who was Governor Walter Kohler at the time, was running for Senate in 1957. And he came to my door. Of course I knew who he was, because I always followed all the important events in politics in our community and in our state and nation. Well, up he came to my door, and here I am, a young lady of 94, and in he comes, and we had a nice chat. And then I asked him, "Governor Kohler, what do you consider to be a modern Republican?" And he said, "It's a little lady of 94 who never missed an opportunity to vote." That's me. I was so proud. It was such a wonderful day. Being an informed voter was an important aspect of my life, and it should be for yours too. I also was involved in social organizations, including the Tuesday Club and the Young Women's Club, which I started with some of my friends. The Young Women's Club merged into the YWCA, which later became the YMCA, or as you call it, the Y. I'm sure you know of it. There was one more organization that I was very proud to be a part of, and that was the Neenah Historical Society. I was part of the charter members and the founders in 1948. At that time, we decided to prepare a book that told many of the stories of our childhood and youth, and I shared my stories. As you recall, I was born in 1863, so my stories were fascinating. I shared these stories with Mr. Shattuck and others who recorded them and put them in the book called History of Neenah. If you have not seen the book, you must. You must get your own copy, and you must read it cover to cover. You'll find it fascinating, and you'll find little bits and pieces about me within it. I am proud to say that my daughters went on to be nurses, my oldest two. My youngest daughter Laura married James Webb, and she and James continued to operate the Krueger hardware store. So that takes us right back to the beginning, when I was a young Krueger born to William and Anna. I'm very proud of our story, and I must say, my life here in Neenah was wonderful. I passed away in May of 1959 at a very ripe old age. The most important thing I did with my life was use my voice. And I want to remind you of the importance of voting. I loved being able to vote. I voted to honor the women who fought for that right. I voted to change the world for the better. And I voted to honor my son who fought and died on the battlefield. It is important to vote, no matter what your circumstances, no matter where you are, no matter what your political persuasion may be. Always take that opportunity and exercise your right to vote. And when you do so, remember that Ida Krueger Barnett told you so. Thanks for coming.